Welcome back into our Huskers Radio Network podcast as we continue our Title IX podcast series and celebrate excellence in women's athletics. For 50 years of Title IX, we welcome in two pioneers of Nebraska softball, head coach Rhonda Revelle and associate head coach Lori Sippel. And I've got some notes here. So since 1982, during that span, there's only been 2 years that one of you was not involved with the program. How crazy is that? I mean, you don't find that anywhere. I mean, I don't know if there's anywhere in the program that has it.
I know. And I think it took us several years to really recognize that. And it probably was Matt Smith.
It was Matt Smith that gave me the numbers.
Well, it was probably Matt Smith that gave us the numbers back then. It's like, oh, really? And so once he said that, you know, of course, we've been aware of it now for several years. It's like, okay, that's kind of a big deal. And that's kind of a long time.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And you walk down the hall and you see all the pictures of all the teams from that time, and you go, yep, know them, was one, coached them, and it's pretty incredible.
Well, 50 years of Title IX. Can you believe that it's been 50 years?
No, and in fact, in our sport, it's been 40 years of NCAA softball, and somebody tweeted the other day about the first NCAA softball College World Series, 1982, and I went, wait, I played in that. I know. So old.
Does it feel like, I mean, because I know it was such a huge deal at the time when they started making these changes for women's sports. Does it feel like it's been that long? Coach Sippel?
It feels like it's been a long time because I know how I feel in my body, and I got to participate in the 80s in those World Series. But I think I'm so busy being thankful and grateful for where it's going and where it is right now, that I think we still have places to go with it and to build upon, but I think everybody's starting to see softball for what it is, and it's growing rapidly, but we've been in it a long time, so it couldn't come soon enough. Yeah,
it is crazy just the growth really over the last decade or so, and even you just look at the Women's College World Series, which we're just wrapping up. You went, what was it like, as you said, you played in 1982, the very first one, to see where it is today? Well,
that's night and day. I mean, there's just no comparison. But even from when Nebraska was last in there in 2013, the venue, first of all, I've never been there just as a spectator in the most recent, last couple of decades. So to just walk in and, park over at Remington Park, is that what it's called, where the horse track is, and walk over and just see outside the stadium. I mean, it's festive. It's like a carnival. And I really, I've been to Omaha and the College World Series for baseball, and I felt like it really rivaled it. It had really a similar kind of feel. You get into the stadium and same kind of thing. I mean, it's not just families there. It's a lot of just fans from all over the country talking about this being on their bucket list or a destination spot. So it's really, I don't know, it's just really exciting to see the sport grow like that.
Yeah, and Lori, to have to add on another level of fans to get to go, and you played in two of them in the early 80s too. What's it like for you to see that now?
I have to pinch myself to think that women get to go and play in an atmosphere that's two tiers. You think of Major League Baseball and you see, well, they're on the second level and people are buying tickets to be in a nosebleed section at a women's event, and I just think that's absolutely awesome. And I think hopefully we just keep growing, and they have to add another tier or think outside the box to even grow it more.
So that's where we are now. But of course, you two were on the ground floor of building this program back. What was it like when you first started playing softball for both of you? When you first got into the sport and trying to make a mark when it wasn't as easy for women back then?
I think back then we weren't trying to make a mark. We just wanted to play.
Yeah.
I mean, the opportunity to play, because I am of the age that I kind of started pre-Title IX and couldn't. I wanted to play as an 8-year-old and couldn't. So I didn't get to play my first softball game until I was 12 years old. So I had 4 or 5 years where I just practiced, which wasn't bad, but it's because I didn't have an opportunity to play. And so then I think as you get to college, and then there were opportunities to earn a scholarship, oh my gosh. And then I remember I graduated, and I remember my coach talking to me about a grad assistantship, and I'm like, really, that can happen? And then somebody else asked about being an assistant coach and getting paid $900 a year to be an assistant coach, and I'm like, wow, that can happen. And you know, every step along the way, it was like a wow moment. Like, this can be a full-time job. Wow, that can happen. And on we go. And then now you see really great things happening, from whether it's you know, multi-year contracts for coaches. Wow, that can happen. To NIL deals. Wow, that can happen. I think probably the biggest thing that I was thinking about just last night, I look at Jocelyn Allo, and they put her up there with the Kobe Bryants and the Michael Jordans, but she's not going to get that salary that, wow, that can happen yet. Yet. So when that happens for a woman in softball, that will be a wow, that can happen moment too.
What was it like for you when you first were getting started playing the sport?
Well, I came from Canada, so I felt like the opportunity to even come to a university in the United States, that to me was, okay, Sippel, let's see what you're made of. Let's see where you really fit. And so when I came here and I saw that they had the old Schulte Field House that we shared with football and baseball and every other sport because it was the only indoor. But yet when I walked in there on my recruiting visit, and it was January, so it was freezing out. And I walked in there and I went, you mean I can practice in here all year round on old field turf that was taken from the original football, you know? And I was just in awe of the facility at that time. But probably more than that, I was in awe of the practices and how fiery they were, and how gritty the women were, and how they were sliding on this astroturf and diving, and just the energy. And I just went, I think I can get good here.
Wow.
And that was a culmination of a lot of things. But just the opportunity that I was given to once I decided to come here, but the opportunity, okay, now I got to see what I'm really made of. I feel like I'm pretty good, but now I really got to prove it, because back then, even coming from Canada to the U.S. in softball, even back then, was at a different level. And so being invited to be a part of that and really see what I might be made of was important. Coming to Nebraska and seeing the facilities back then, I was like, okay, I don't mess this up. I have a great opportunity here. And then I think the other thing too is just, I remember getting my first pair of spikes, and you got one, and you wore them all year, but I just thought I was blessed. But at the same time, as you got better and the game got growing, and you went to California and you did all these things, it was like I always remembered people coming in and they could only do day trips. The women's program could only do day trips because they had to decide how far they would travel for gas, and they had to drive themselves. And in some cases, families drove their vans and put the kids in them. So it was very localized because of the opportunity and the money that was behind it.
So, Rhonda, do you remember when Title IX, when they announced it, how it all unfolded, how you felt in that moment? Did you realize the possibility that was going to come from that?
You know, I was pretty young, I think 10 or 12, but what I knew is that I was going to have an opportunity to play. So I didn't understand exactly why. I just knew some law had been passed. I'm like, great. So you know, I was a bat girl for my dad's fast pitch team, and so then I got to hang up those baseball pants and got to play softball and put on the softball shorts. But I just remember it was just exciting because we put together a team, and right away we were pretty good, and we played on regional and then the national level, and I was 12 years old, and we were already taking a team to the national tournament, playing for a national championship, and that felt really special. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you guys start coaching, and you talked about this a little bit, but even though Title IX was in place and you could have the program, but the opportunities were still limited and the resources were limited. So what were some of the things, the challenges that you guys dealt with, especially there in the early 80s?
As coaches or players?
Well, both. Players, first of all, yeah.
Okay, well, I think as a player, for me, we didn't have a field on campus. Mm-hmm. So we were about 4 miles off of campus that we had to drive to every day to play, and it was fine. We had a field. We didn't really think about it, but now that I think about that, that was a pretty big sacrifice. We didn't have a locker room. We just went in the bathroom and changed our clothes, didn't think anything of it. One of the things I remember in 1982 when we won the Big 8 championship, we got a sweatshirt. And I wore that sweatshirt till it had holes in it because it was our championship sweatshirt, but it just signified so much because we only had one other sweatshirt, but we got a second sweatshirt for winning the championship.
Wow.
So when you just put it in perspective like that, those three things are big.
What about for you?
I remember one of the first Big 8 championship was actually down in Reeves, for me, was down in Reeves Park in Oklahoma. And up to that point, we had basically the buses that, shuttle through between campuses. That's what we would travel in. And so you'd have this 3-foot area in the back that you put all your equipment and all of your luggage, and then everybody, the 16 of you, I think it was about at the time, and then the coaches would drive that. So it was one like minibus. But when we went down to Reeves Park for the Big 8s at that time, we got a bus. And I mean, just how special you felt because we got to sit in a bus, and we each got our own little seat. We didn't have to share. Plus, and so you're over the moon for that, and that was the version of making you feel special when you're going to a tournament of that caliber, and then we can go from that to then we got to get our own vans, but we would still have to drive them. And just the idea of driving down there, getting a hotel, playing 2 doubleheaders, and then having to drive 8 hours back. And it was like, but we thought at that time we were blessed, and we were, but at the same time, it's like, it's got to be able to be better. Yeah. We can do better. And thankfully we are.
Yeah, I was going to ask for both of you too. Do you remember when you started coaching? Do you remember a switch where you're like you were a player and you were thinking, "Oh, this is great," but then when you became a coach and you're realizing I'm fighting for these young women and the growth of this sport? Did that change for you in your mind first of all?
It did in that comparison. What do we say? Comparison is the
thief of joy.
Thief of joy. But to an extent, but at the same time, when you just compare the hours and the time and the effort that the females were putting in, the ladies were putting in, and you see how much, because you're sharing facilities, and you see how much time and effort the men are putting in, it's like, this is samey, but then when it came time to leave on a trip, it wasn't. And so it was and then probably, and we weren't the only ones that noticed it, they did. And so now you have to speak to, they see that we're loading into this tin can type thing, and they're getting on a bus, or they're doing, and it's like, so, and we didn't have an answer for it. And so we needed to go, no, you know what, we need to maybe ask better questions.
What about for you? Did it switch for you where you realized, okay, now I'm having to fight for a team as opposed to just playing for fun?
Yeah, and especially I think as a head coach, you'd maybe think about it a little differently. And I remember when it really hit me the very first time, we were actually, Lori talked about the Schulte Field House. Well, there were 2 batting cages that came down from the ceiling in there, but we didn't really get to use them. We had to go down in the mushroom garden and use cages. And it was just kind of standard operating procedure. The softball team went down, and it was in a dust bowl, and the baseball team was up. And it hit me one day that I needed to go to the baseball coach at the time, John Sanders, and go, "John, why is this arrangement this way?" He goes, "Well, it's just always been this way." I said, "We need to change that." And so we were able to then start getting some cage time in there. We just had to have a conversation because, honestly, he'd never thought about it. I said, "Can we work something out?" And I still don't think it was equitable. I think if my memory serves, we got it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they kept it on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. It was something like that. But at least we started to make a dent. And then when it came, I remember, and I think this is possibly true for a lot of women from my generation. It was hard to fight maybe for salary equity, but it was much easier for me to fight for Lori. I mean, Lori was making $13,000 for the longest time. And I'm like, it was the threshold to get her to $20,000 was like monumental. And I was on a mission with Dr. Hibner, like, we've got to cross over the $20,000 threshold. I mean, she is like a legend in Nebraska already at that time, and we've got to get her in the 20s.
Wow.
And that was in the 1990s. It wasn't that long ago.
Wow. So, I mean, and again, that being said, even though at the time, and now looking back, oh, well, it needed to be better, y'all had some fun times, and some of the things that you had to do. I mean, I was told a story where you just get some chicken and some buckets to go and ride up in the van and hit the road, right?
Oh, yeah. You know, the vans, I miss the vans in a certain kind of way because there was a lot of sharing that went on. And for us to communicate back and forth, we had the old-fashioned walkie-talkies. And literally, we made song games out of it from van to van. I mean, we had our own karaoke. We created competitions. I mean, we did. It was fun.
Did y'all have radio names and over and out and all of that?
Well, we did some 10-4 Good Buddy stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with Rhonda. There was something lost from that too, in terms of Rhonda got all the freshmen, so the head coach got the freshmen, and so they'd go, they'd kind of make their way over to Rhonda's van, and then I got more of the upperclassmen in my van, but you were in such a close proximity that you knew how everybody was feeling before the game and after the game, and conversations were just really organically break out. Now in the buses or on the planes, they're as far away from us as they possibly can be. Not really, but they kind of put the freshmen in the front and the seniors go to the back. But so you can hear their conversations, but you're not nearly as in the middle of them as you were before.
And even things like we then had a field over Maple Lee on campus here, but the dirt was constituted of dump dirt. So every day we knew before we started practice that we were going to pick up rocks, nails, whatever, glass off the dirt, and then Coach Sippel was going to take the Honda three-wheeler and drag it so we could get ready for practice. But it was like a team event, and Pride in the Park was happening just out of necessity, but it really bonded the team too. We painted our own dugouts. We had a player on our team that was a graphic artist, and she designed it. We just went to work and painted our own dugouts. So there were some things that you look back and go, you had to do that?
They call that team building now. Well, that was just something that we did back then.
You had to. You didn't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's not something that you would want women to have nowadays because you want it to continue to grow, but do you guys both feel an appreciation every time you step out onto the field, knowing all the things you had to battle through and fight for to get to where it is today?
100%. Lori and I, we haven't even really talked about this in probably 10 years. We're always the last two to leave the dugout, whether it's game day or practice day, and I think we both take a moment, I can only speak for myself, to just kind of just drink it in and just go, wow.
Yeah, you spent so much time trying to build it to what it is that I'm not in a hurry to leave it. And it's one of the, some people might like oceans, some people might like forests, some people might like mountains. There's nothing to me that's, especially after a win, but there's nothing to me that's greater than seeing the stadium clear out and just being in the dugout as everybody leaves it. And yeah, there might be the buzz of people working on the grounds and doing different things like that, but it could be a part of my calm app, to be honest with you. It just feels really, really good. And I think there is a level of being grateful for where we are, regardless of the scoreboard. And I think it's just good karma to really make sure that you are grateful for the arena, to be in it.
Being that how big this game continues to be and the record numbers tuning in on TV, was there a moment where you felt a shift happening where this sport is getting big and getting popular and people like to watch it?
I don't know when the year or the years were, but I remember at our NFCA Coaches Convention, Mega Ronowitz, ESPN, started showing up, and she would meet with coaches or she would give an update. And just by listening, leadership matters. And just by listening to her speak and knowing her story, she was a Division III softball player. It's her passion. And her passion is women's sports, but specifically, she was a softball player. And she talked about how she was going to pour into it, and she felt like it was her life's calling. And if you go back and you track one single person, one single person can change the course of time, right? And I really feel like if we had to tag it to one single person changing the course of time for the notoriety and the publicity, particularly through the television venue, it's Meg Aronowitz.
I think the Olympics had a big start as well, with the United States being so strong at the Olympics, and certainly Atlanta in '96 being the host, but that was the first time you really saw people lining up to go in, and I think the college game is blowing that out of the water right now for sure. But at the same time, I think that's when the game got showcased in a very professional manner, and I think people took notice of that, and certainly just these are athletes out here getting it done, and so I think that was a good start. And then all the pre-Olympics and post-Olympics, because it was college players that were making up those teams. And so, well, how did they get there? What are they doing outside of that 1 year every 4 years? And I think that kind of started the push a little bit, and then Meg really got the ball rolling and is steadfast in continuing to grow it.
I got to go backwards a little bit, because I think maybe people might be interested to hear, and I think we talked about this on National Girls and Women in Sports Day, but for you, Lori, as well, how you even got into playing softball and why you fell in love with the sport as a little girl in the first place.
My dad played men fast pitch, so that was my gateway into softball, and that I was just enthralled with the pitchers. And my dad played on a really highly competitive team, pay and pack, and anybody that knows men's fast pitch can go, oh, I know the pay and pack teams. And then when we would go practice at this park, there was another field, and I would see these women practicing. I'm like, oh, women can play too. And I remember Nancy Wellborn, a really big-time pitcher in the time, was from Oregon, or at least pitching in Oregon, and I don't know, I just became enamored with it.
I had a brother that played men's fast pitch, boys fast pitch, and I would go to all of his tournaments in our local. I came from the country, and we just had our local community would have. There was the field. The Diamond started games at 3, and then the guys would come in and play at 6 and 9, and so you would be practicing on one field, and then you'd go and watch, and that's just what you did. And so I watched him. And we lived on a farm, and I was the youngest, and so I didn't want to be inside. I wanted to be outside, so I would just constantly be throwing with him. And then, of course, you got to be on the wrong end of a game of burnout, and with your brother, and you just learn to catch. And I think they just decided, well, let's sign her up, And so that's kind of how I got my start. And once I got playing, it was. I wanted to be good. I wanted to be needed on the team, and I wanted to be somebody that they wanted to have as a teammate. So just kept growing.
What about to become a coach? So that's how you got into softball. What about when that moment came where you're like, okay, I want to coach this sport?
Mm-hmm. So I always wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to play until I was 44. I just had it in my mind I wanted to play until I was 44. I don't know why.
Specifically 44.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to be a teacher is because you had summers off so you could play. See, I had it all mapped out, had it all figured out. And then, like I said, my college coach said, Rhonda, have you ever thought about coaching? Well, my dad was my coach. He gave up playing to coach our team. And I'm like, well, I've lived with a coach, and that's really a thing. And so then somebody planted a seed, and it went from there. So I actually, right after I graduated from Nebraska, I went over and I worked at Wesleyan for a couple of years. So my very first year after graduating, I've been coaching ever since. Now, I've done some other jobs to make a living, but I haven't not coached 1 year since college, and I think Lori's got the same story there.
Right. I remember I was being interviewed for an article in the Daily Nebraskan while I was playing here, and I said I wanted to coach, and I don't know what the exact question was, but I said I really want to be able to coach, and I probably surprised myself when I said it, because I don't remember sitting down and saying I'm going to do this until whatever. I just loved the game. I loved finding edges. I loved finding ways to get better. I loved seeing, well, tipping my hat to the opponent when they were good, but then trying to figure out how I could be that. So there was just, I loved being beside the coach. If I wasn't out on I loved being beside the coach. And then I just realized I had a lot of coaches in my life that influenced me, and that would just be really cool if I could say that maybe I influenced somebody the way I had been. So I remember saying that, and then I went back, and the next day all my teammates came, she wants to be a coach, she wants to be a coach, and we actually, sometimes they tease me now at alumni events that I said that, and it's a good, fun time, but it was just, I wanted to have the opportunity to maybe influence somebody the way so many had influenced me.
Well, I know why I love the sport, but from your guys' perspective, why do you think people have fallen in love with this sport? Really, I mean, here recently, but continue to fall in love with the sport.
Mm-hmm. I have a couple different theories that are kind of in different buckets, but first thing is what I hear from people that are outside the sport. So they're maybe in athletics, but they're outside of softball specifically, and it really comes back to the relationship aspect. Like, they just have found the sport of softball and the people that play it very relationship oriented, very teammate oriented, very bring you all in, and kind of a family feel. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist in other sports, but that's what I get from people that serve multiple sports and work with multiple sports, and just it feels a connection, and I really love that. And then the other thing that I hear in that same vein, I hear this from a lot of coaches that coach other sports, is I can't believe how much you coaches share, and you kind of take care and support one another even though you're competitive against one another. And so again, it's back to that relationship, that sense of belonging, that connection. I think that the average fan feels that energy, and it helps them feel connection, and I think we're all searching for that. Mm-hmm. And I think it just really brings a joy to people. So that would be my biggest guess.
I think that I have a lot of the same, but I'll go in a little different angle in that, we're in an airport, and people will bravely come up, "What sport are you?" And they never know. They never guess, because all different sizes, but there's a core skill set that anybody can have, and I think it's that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and so in softball you can have different body types. But if you can master a skill set that then you're willing to share and give to the team, you can have a role that lifts and takes the team anywhere. And so I think there's a lot of people can see themselves in the game, perhaps. Mm-hmm. And then when they see all of those different pieces working for each other and celebrating each other, maybe they just don't feel so alone, and so you're stuck in one mold. So I think that's part of it too, is that a lot of people, it's harder than they think, and they aren't in the same arena sometimes, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of people that can see themselves in the game.
I'd be interested to hear from both of you too, just from when you were playing to the players now. The biggest area is that this game has changed and gotten better, improved.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but before we answer that, can we turn it back on you?
Yeah,
because
sure.
You started by saying, I know why I love the game.
I love it. I think it's a fun game to watch. It's fast. It is, I think you could tune in and not know about the sport and get it really easily. But for me, why I am drawn into it is because they're allowed to have fun. The players are allowed to have fun. You can tell every team you watch, a lot of them, the ones that you enjoy watching or that I enjoy watching, are enjoying playing the game. And that's what sports is, right? It's fun, and you enjoy, it's an escape, and you want to have fun watching it. And to me, of all the sports that you watch, there's no doubt about it, you see the players having the most fun, or at least showing it that they're having the most fun in the game of softball. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that.
So that's for me anyways.
Yeah. Okay, biggest changes. Well, I'll go with the physicalness of the athlete and just how they've been trained, whether it's been through nutrition, strength training, skill set training, all that. I mean, it's you can't even compare. And then the second thing is technology. I mean, just our bats. We were just laughing. We were just laughing the other day about the bats we had when we played. I mean, it's like we were using wooden sticks almost. So to me, those are the two greatest things: is the advancement in training the actual athlete in all areas, and then the advancement in technology.
I was going to say that technology initially too, because in '96, going into the Olympics, it was only a year or two before that any company even tried to design something for women's softball, for fast pitch. Everybody was still taking men's things produced for baseball and trying to turn it to help a women's sport, and it wasn't going on. So you think of it, it was only the early '90s that companies went, oh, this can be an Olympic sport, and so maybe we'll put some of our budget towards making gloves that fit their hands, batting gloves, bats, and things like that. And then that just grew. Now they're seeking the female softball player to actually promote their product. So that helped. And then they were actually interested in what was going to help to advance and make our game better. They were bringing people into the panel, women coaches into the panel, players into the panel. How can we help you to, and so, and that wasn't that long ago. So I think that really helped. And then as we actually got to use equipment that was made for women, now that the equipment has to advance because the women are.
Yeah.
And just the tech engine, just the analytics and the video and all those things that we're able to, we taught ourselves based on watching somebody. Now we can have so much information on video that we can help the players, but we can also continue to educate ourselves on the next best practice.
Have you found, too, that, this is kind of with all sports, but with the athlete and just the way that it's grown, you've had to stay evolving, basically, to keep up with each year, that it kind of changes and grows. How do you go about that part of it?
I think you have to be committed to that. You have to have an awareness that you've always got to evolve. You always need to be learning. If you're not learning, you're regressing, right? And that doesn't matter if you're a 30-year-old coach or a 60-year-old coach. Doesn't matter. That really bears out. I think at the end of the day, though, using all the resources that you have available, every individual is different. Like, I might need to use video for one reason, and Lori might need to use it for another. And then learning your athletes and what helps them the most and what's best for them. Because I think that just like with anything, some people can be, paralysis by analysis. Other people really run with that stuff. But the other thing, at the end of the day, we're all still human beings. We all have a soul. The relationship part is very important, and just knowing that you care about one another and taking time to develop that never goes away, and that never gets old-fashioned.
Anything?
Nothing to add to that. No, that sounds right.
So when, kind of wrapping this up a little bit, but when you first picked up your first glove or bat and fell in love with the sport, could you have ever thought that it would have taken you to the places that it has to where you are today, and how it would have evolved into the game that it has today?
No. I just remember, again, I wasn't playing yet because I wasn't 12, but I could hear my dad's Jeep coming home from work every day at 4:30, and our two gloves were stacked on top of each other, and I wouldn't even let him in the house. We were going to go out and pitch in the cul-de-sac, and I didn't even know why. I never knew if I'd ever play a game, but I just loved to play catch. And now to think about that, it's created, for me personally, my entire career, and so much joy and excitement of watching a game grow and hopefully impacting and having a good positive impact on a lot of young people. It's more than you could ever dream of, right?
Same story. I remember hopping a fence to my first tryout. I took a different bus from school, got them to stop at the ball field. I went down in the ditch and hopped over the fence, and I was about a half hour early and just sat on the bench. in total silence. Maybe that's why I like to sit in the dugout to this day. And first team I ever made, I think we were the Carrots.
The Carrots?
Yeah, Saturday mornings, and we were all vegetables because we were a farming community, and I was the Carrots. And first game was like the Carrots versus the Turnips, and
sounds like a heated battle.
Well, yeah, but it's like sometimes if you think of it that simply and go back to why did you play, and therefore why do you coach, sometimes that's probably the most important question every year to keep you going.
So how can we continue to grow the game, women's sports in particular? You know, I think you had said earlier, we're not there yet. We're not we're not at the pinnacle yet. So how do we keep growing it? And Lori, I'll start with you on this one.
Wow. I think we always have to continue to educate ourselves and grow and make sure that we're being really current and trying to think ahead. You know, don't get too comfortable where you are. Is there what's bigger and better and going forward, but making sure that you're very present for the athletes that you have at that time. I think just understanding learning styles and things like that so that we can be educated, so we can work with the kid that really needs a lot of vision, so work with the person that needs you three different examples so that they can get it, and continue to educate yourself on just coaching, not just the game, but the people. I think that's how we continue to grow it that way. And just don't put a ceiling on it. Mm-hmm. Don't put a ceiling on it. Well, this is the way we did it. Well, that's been successful. But at the same time, what's out there in the future? How can we continue to stretch the players that are in it, the game themselves? How can we make it an easier game to watch? How, just all those things. Just always keep asking questions.
And I think a real key are the younger people in the game, whether it's the younger professionals or still the players, because they have great ideas, and they probably are thinking of things that have never been thought of before. And we need to keep asking those questions, like, how can this game be better? We need to ask all sorts of people in all sorts of pockets, how can this game be better? And that's, I think, how a lot of times the big ideas come.
And the exposure, too, how important is that to continue to give a platform to these student athletes, whether ESPN, Big Ten Network? You know, I know we get a lot of fans asking about the Big Ten Plus stream. Not everybody has that. But, you know, they're just continuing to fight to put this sport on TV, because obviously people watch it when they put it there, right?
Right. No, I think that's of critical importance, and it's amazing how many people in all of our sports, but I'm just going to speak for softball in particular, talked about watching us this year, but they didn't live in Lincoln or they weren't at our games, but how many people got to watch us? So you have to have a platform to be able to do that. And I think that this is a game, you talked about it, it's exciting, it's fast-paced, it's easy to understand. So I think it's easy to be a fan of.
And there's a place, and the more we have that exposure and venues and avenues to do that, the more there's opportunity for people who played the game and were great at the game outside of being a coach or a player. Mm-hmm. You know, go and educate people through the broadcast and through the analytics and through all that, and grow it that way. There's a lot of ways that you can continue to grow it. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that people really took away from the place was the relationship that your staff had with the women's basketball staff. And how special is that to be a part of a program that you have the success of women's basketball and volleyball, that you guys can push each other and it's not competing, you are supporting and lifting each other up? Mm-hmm.
Well, I know for me that has really, that growth of that relationship and those relationships, I feel like it's just enhanced us personally, and I hope basketball would say the same. But I feel like it's starting to, like, I was at an event the other night, and Amy happened to be there too, and she was across the room. She walked over, and a couple of people said, "We love that you guys are willing to go public and talk about how you support each other." And I'm like, Amy, this thing's kind of catching fire. Like our friendship is, people know that we're friends. I mean,
yeah.
But I think people like to see that. Mm-hmm. They like to see people in the same profession, not against each other, but supporting and celebrating each other's successes.
And I just remember years ago when our offices were in the Coliseum, and Coach Pettit was the head coach of volleyball at the time, and very seldom did we actually get to sit down with him, but we were on both different ends of the hall. But there was a time, and he always had great nuggets of information. And I just remember one time we were discussing something, and he's like, you have to have a network. You have to have a network that you can rely on. You have to have a person. And it doesn't have to be somebody within the sport, but you have to have a colleague that's going through, and their journey is really similar. It's not about the bat, whether it's a bat and ball or a volleyball or whatever. It's the position. You have to have a network of people that you can sound things off and things like that. And I think, but this is the one time that we really committed to that, and I think it really benefited. And it is nice to be able to throw things out there, but just to have different discussions and stuff. I really enjoyed it.
And another thing, this is just one small thing that was a big thing. We heard from the women's basketball staff after each game all year long, and they heard from us after each one of their games all year long. Mm-hmm. So just that support network right there. Mm-hmm. Win, lose, or draw.
Yep.
I could ask you guys a million more questions, but my final one will just be, as we kick off this 50-year anniversary celebration, and we're doing a lot of things here at Nebraska over the next year, but we kick it off here in June. When you think about Title IX, what does it mean to each of you?
Well, opportunity. And that's the one word that I keep trying to grow legs on, opportunity. And opportunity in so many ways. Opportunity to compete, opportunity to play at the highest level, opportunity for exposure, opportunity for equality in not only facilities, but pay equity, just continuing to push the envelope in opportunity for women in leadership positions within athletics, in all athletics. I just talked to one of our alums yesterday. She said that an AD contacted her about an opening for the softball job at a university, but the baseball job was also open for $20,000 more. I said, ask him if you could be his baseball coach. Opportunity, right?
Yeah. Mom.
I think all of that, but I also go, I think historically. And when we first started coaching here and we had our first alumni event, I went back to the club when Nebraska was a club sport. And we've always tried to include, so we might have the once it became a varsity sport, but we've always included anybody that we know of who played for Nebraska. They played for the red team at that time, that even if it was a club sport, because it's on their shoulders as well that we rise. And so the opportunity, but I like to always remember who continued to advance the opportunity for us, and then who are on our shoulders, and think of them as well, so that we can continue to grow it, and maybe with a grateful heart, but at the same time understanding that we've got more.
I like that. Like you guys, you went with future or present, and you went with past a little bit.
And that's why we work so well together.
That is right there, right?
That's 3 decades of working together. 3 decades.
Only 2 years over the last 40, right?
Right.
Going back to the beginning. And just finally, the support that you guys have for women's sports here, that people care. I mean, you just don't find that everywhere either. That's got to be special, too.
It's so special. And I'll go back to historical there with Barb Hibner, because Barb Hibner got it going a long time ago, and a lot of people just chimed in, and I just think that's why we are years ahead of a lot of places. And I mean, rabid, as you've witnessed, rabid sport fans for all of our sports.
I pinch myself every time we have a recruit on campus and I get to show off this university and this athletics department. It's one of my favorite things to do, is a tour, and so when we get to see what the university and the support of the university and the support of walking down the hall, and recruits and parents are just in awe of people that know us, say hi, who we say hi to, know them by name, and as I think that's just something that we need to see as a prized possession and continue to make sure that that's part of this university and this athletics department.
Anything we missed that you guys wanted to add, talk about?
I think we covered a lot of ground today.
I think we did.
Yeah.
I think I got it all in. But appreciate you guys so much for talking to us. It's fascinating to me to always, you think about we're always moving forward, but to take the time to think about how far we have come is always important, and to continue to push forward is a lot of times to go back and think about how far we did come.
Yeah, I think both are important. So I appreciate you just taking the time to really spotlight this topic over this month. So thank you.
Thank you guys. And again, for much more on the Huskers Title IX celebration, huskers.com/Title IX, and make sure you subscribe and like wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the episodes coming up over the next year.